Continuation of STEM Biology, Chapter 23, Podcast Part 2. Gram-positive bacteria. Most of these bacteria are gram-positive. These bacteria can cause strep throat. Another disease that gram-positive bacteria cause is botulism. Botulism is a very potent disease that gets in food during the canning process. And so if you see any cans that are expanded or dented, that's why you probably should not buy them, because it could have been a mistake during the canning process, and this bacteria called Clostridium botulinum got in there. Another strain of that can also be used in medicine to treat painful muscle spasms and to erase wrinkles. Gram-positive bacteria also causes milk to go sour and make yogurt. Anthrax is another example of gram-positive bacteria. Anthrax could be used as a biological weapon and wipe out populations. There's a picture of strep throat, and there's a picture of what anthrax can do. Gram-positive bacteria continued. Actinomycetes are gram-positive bacteria that form colonies. A lot of them grow in the soil and make antibiotics. Antibiotics are chemicals that obviously stop the growth of bacteria. Two examples of antibiotics are streptomycin and tetracycline. When you are taking an antibiotic, the doctor always tells you to take as directed, follow the directions, and to always finish your bottle even though you feel better. Some gram-positive bacteria cause TB or tuberculosis and leprosy, which is Hansen's disease. Cyanobacteria are bacteria that do photosynthesis, which means they're giving off oxygen as a byproduct. An example of cyanobacteria is Anabaena. Anabaena bacteria grow in filaments and they form heterocysts. And heterocysts have enzymes that fix nitrogen. So this is another example of bacteria that fix nitrogen, which means they're taking nitrogen from the air and converting it into ammonia. Cyanobacteria are food resources, so food chain for marine and freshwater organisms in their ecosystem. Here is Anabaena, and they can form these bulges called heterocysts where there's enzymes in there, and those enzymes will help fix nitrogen in the air. All right, group number 4 are the Spirochetes. And these obviously can cause some serious diseases of bacterial lesions on the skin. These are gram-negative and they're spiral shaped. Some of them are aerobic and some of them are anaerobic. They can live freely or they can cause disease, which means they are a pathogen. The picture there is showing what can happen if you have syphilis. Syphilis is a bacterial spirochete that is transmitted sexually. Also, spirochetes can cause Lyme disease. If you know anything about Lyme disease, you know it's from a deer tick. And there's this picture of them. They're spiral bacteria. You get bit by them and it causes this type of rash. And notice the cartoon that says, I don't have chlamydia. What's chlamydia? I've never even heard of it. I feel fine. But in reality, she might have it because a lot of people who get chlamydia, the sexually transmitted chlamydia, don't even know it. Chlamydia is gram-negative and it is cocci, or they live only inside animal cells. They depend on animal cells for protection and nutrients. One exception from all of these groups is that this group of bacteria does not have peptidoglycan in their cell walls. And there's one specific species of this group that causes chlamydia, which is a sexually transmitted infection. Chlamydia can occur in girls and in boys. For girls, only 30% of the women who get it have symptoms. So 70% of women have it and don't even know it, which is serious. When you have it, you burn when you urinate, you have rectal pain or discharge. If you leave it untreated, it can spread to your uterus and then cause you to be infertile and you won't be able to have any kids. For men, it's very common. 1 in 4 men will get it. Same symptoms. If untreated, it can cause inflammation of the urethra. And that finishes our first section. So first thing I want you to remember, we did compare in chapter 4 eukaryotes and prokaryotes. So now we're just concentrating on the prokaryote part. All prokaryotes, which are bacteria, have a cell wall, a cell membrane, cytoplasm, and DNA. Some bacteria will also have capsule. Some have a pili. Some have endospores, and some have flagella. First part we're going to talk about is the cell wall. The cell wall is this green structure that's in between the yellow and the gray going around the bacteria. It gives the cell its shape, just like in a plant cell. It protects the cell from toxic substances, and in this case, the toxic substances are antibiotics, and it is made of peptidoglycan, that protein carbohydrate mixture, and remember that is not found in the archaea bacteria, only in the domain, the true regular bacteria. Next cell part is the cell membrane, which is the gray inner layer going around. It's very similar to the other cell membrane we studied. It is also called the plasma membrane. It is composed of lipid bilayers, but they are different in the two different groupings, and it is a selective barrier. It chooses what can go in and out. Many important metabolic functions will occur on that membrane right there. Next is the cytoplasm. Within the cytoplasm, you see nucleoid. It is not a nucleus, and there are ribosomes in there. Remember, prokaryotes do not have organelles. There are no mitochondria, any type of organelle in there whatsoever. There's ribosomes in there, so they can make protein. They do have DNA, which is found in the nucleoid, and they do contain small organic and inorganic molecules and ions. If you took it looks kind of complicated, but if you take this and untangle it, it is one big single closed loop of DNA, and it's actually attached, but it is attached to the cell membrane. It is not in a nuclear membrane. There is no nucleus. There is no nuclear membrane. Some bacteria also contain a plasmid. A plasmid would be a small circle, and it's not on this diagram, of a single small circular self-replicating loop of DNA. So it's like an extra piece of DNA. And this DNA is special, this plasmid, because it carries genes to cause diseases, and it carries genes to resist antibiotics. So the capsule is the yellow outermost layer in a bacterial cell. A capsule is made of polysaccharides, which is a carbohydrate. It protects the cell from drying out, and it protects the cell from harsh chemicals. It also helps protect them from being eaten by a white blood cell. Some capsules are made of a fuzzy coat of sticky sugars called a glycocalyx. And so if it's made of this sticky substance, it makes the capsule sticky, and so it allows this bacteria to stick to its host. Okay, next one is pili. Pili are not the same thing as cilia. Cilias would be way smaller. Pili are longer. Pili are short hair-like protein structures on the surface of some bacteria. They help the bacteria connect to each other. They connect to each other. They might exchange DNA, or they connect to a surface like your teeth. Okay. Next one is endospore. An endospore is a thick coat of a resistant structure. It's formed when conditions become harsh. So if it gets really hot, strong chemicals around, radiation, it's really dry, any of those type of conditions, the bacteria goes into alarm mode and they form this endospore. An endospore is a thick coating that goes around the whole bacteria cell. And what it's trying to do is protect its DNA. It wants its DNA to survive. So once the harsh conditions get better, then the bacteria will be okay. Usually gram-positive bacteria have endospores. All right, the last cell part is the flagella, and it's similar to the flagella we already learned. They're long whip-like structures. They allow the bacteria to move either toward food, for example, or away from danger. They may have one, as shown in the picture, or multiple flagella.
Bacteria are single-celled organisms that lack a cell nucleus. Their cells have no internal compartments or membrane systems. Most bacterial cells are about 10 times smaller than most eukaryotic cells. Bacteria have anaerobic and aerobic metabolic abilities. They also have flagella that allow them to move from place to place. Some bacteria also have shorter, thicker outgrowths called pili. Pili enable bacteria to attach to surfaces. Bacterial chromosomes consist of a single circular piece of DNA. Bacteria reproduce by binary fission, a process in which one cell pinches into two cells.
This is in your book. There is a nice chart that lists all the structures and all the functions for every part in the bacterial cell. A couple other little side notes. How does a bacterial cell eat? How does it do metabolism? They obtain nutrients either from a non-living world or the living world. Three main categories, of what they can be. They can be heterotrophs, which can obtain carbon from other organisms. They can be autotrophs, which means they get their energy from the sun and their carbon from carbon dioxide. Or they can be chemotrophs, which get energy from chemicals in the environment. Another concept we want to go through is their habitat. Where are they found? Bacteria are found and they live in different environments, which we saw with the archaea. Especially temperature requirements, they range from 0 degrees to 110 degrees, depending on the species. And same thing for pH. They mostly grow the best at a neutral or 7 pH scale, but there are exceptions, obviously, with the thermoacidophiles. Reproduction and recombination, like the little clip showed, they reproduce by binary fission, but they also can genetically recombinate their DNA, okay? And there's 3 ways they can do that. Transformation is one. Transformation is taking in DNA from the outside or something else, or maybe even another organism, and implanting it in them. Another one is conjugation, and that is when they use their pili and they exchange DNA. Or they do transduction, which is actually done through a virus. A virus, a bacteriophage, will take the bacterial DNA and possibly transfer it to another bacteria. Bacteria in health, there are 2 ways you can get a disease, through an endotoxin or an exotoxin. An endotoxin are inside the bacteria. So until that bacteria cell dies, those toxins are not released until those are, released. till it can come out. Otherwise, they're exotoxins, and the bacteria would actually secrete them out while they're living. Antibiotics, how do they work? They actually interfere with the cellular activities of the bacteria. For example, penicillin specifically will block the ability to build a new cell wall, and tetracycline specifically blocks protein synthesis. If you can't make proteins, you're not going to be able to grow. Antibiotics are made naturally in the environment by fungi and other bacteria. Bacteria can become resistant to antibiotics through mutating or just being overprescribed. So that's why it's important for doctors to only prescribe antibiotics if they have a bacterial infection and not a viral infection. Emerging infectious diseases. There's so many diseases that have come out. The number of them have increased because there's more antibiotic resistant bacteria, and there's more people traveling throughout the world and bringing these diseases back into our country. If you get a disease from an animal, that animal that had it, and giving it to the human, that is called zoonosis. Food hygiene and bacteria. Those of you who have cooked or work in a restaurant know that it's very important to select, store, cook, and handle all food properly. Make sure everything is cleanly, cleaned, and sanitized. Making sure you wash your hands in hot soapy water. Bacteria can reproduce every 20 minutes, so that's why washing your hands is very important to be able to not get sick. All right, so the last thing of this disease chart. This chart is in your book, but making sure you know what anthrax is. Just being aware of which ones are bacterial diseases and which ones were viral diseases from last chapter. Anthrax, you breathe in the spores from that. Bite of an infected flea is the bubonic plague. Drinking contaminated water in underdeveloped countries is cholera. That's very serious because you can get dehydrated. Dense collections of bacteria in your mouth actually destroy minerals in your tooth and cause dental cavities. The tick one, when it's a tick that you're getting a bit from, that's Lyme disease. Breathing is TB, and you get tested for that. That's a serious disease, tuberculosis. And the bite of an infected flea or louse is typhus, and you might have heard of typhus fever. It says many species of bacteria are used to produce food, and bacteria can process different food. They also produce industrial chemicals to find minerals. They also produce insecticides. And bacteria are used now to clean up chemical spills and oil spills. And this has been in the news lately in the last few years about oil spills and the big oil spill that just happened. They have learned that they can take bacteria and actually use that bacteria to break down the oil and these pollutants that are in the water. That process is called bioremediation. That finishes our podcast for chapter 23.